A massive winter storm? I'm freezing. That's today's top story in Growing English. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Well, it's time for Grow in English with the news, your free, simple, and interesting study of English by looking at pronunciation and words that may be new to you to help you grow in English. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Well, I'm your host, Paul, and I'm coming from the southern United States, and boy, is it cold. I mean, really cold. Let's see, according to my thermometer, 20 degrees, and that's, let's see, I forgot my, we're not in in America, we're not really metric savvy. So, anyways, that's about -7 right now, and it's supposed to go down to much worse than that, as in -11 or something like that. Anyways, it's going to be cold, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's do not delay any longer and get to today's news and see what we can find in our story today. Well, our story comes from Mission, Kansas, and of course, under fair use by the Associated Press, and we appreciate that so very, very much. The headline, Massive Winter Storm Brings Rolling Blackouts and Power Outages. Now, we're not going to go over every single word, but just pay attention to the things that I say and the way that I say them, at least for Southern English anyways, where we speak a lot slower, so hopefully it's a little bit easier to learn. But anyways, the story starts like this. Tens of millions of Americans endured bone-chilling temperatures, blizzard conditions, that's snow, power outages, and canceled holiday gatherings Friday, that's today for us, from a winter storm that forecasters said was nearly unprecedented in its scope, exposing about 60% of the U.S. population to some sort of winter weather advisory or warning. All right, by way of reading comprehension, let's notice a few things. Tens of millions of Americans endured bone-chilling temperatures. That's when you get cold all the way down to the bone. I normally don't wear a jacket, but I had to grab one and put it on before the program because it's so cold in my room. I don't have anything under. I'm on the second floor, and there's nothing under me but a parking area. And so there's no insulation. So it's pretty cool in my room. It's not freezing, but like it is outside, but still cold enough for me. And I've got a lot of insulation, and I still had to put a jacket on. But bone-chilling temperatures chills you all the way to the inside of your bones. Blizzard conditions, power outages, and I've spoken to several friends even tonight in the states of Texas and Tennessee that said that they're having power outages, which is not good when it's cold because if you're on electricity only, there's no way to get warm. Canceled holiday gatherings. Well, Christmas is coming up for some of us on this weekend. In fact, tomorrow's Christmas Eve. Sunday will be Christmas Day. And for the thousands of plane flights that have been canceled, there's not going to be much going home for Christmas and not much Christmas cheer spread, but nothing you can do about it but just endure it. A winter storm that forecasters said was nearly unprecedented. In other words, other things I've read said this was a generational storm. And what does that mean? It means, as my friend in India would say, that's American slang. I don't know what that means. Unprecedented in its scope means it's generational. It has only happened once every generation or so. So for decades, we've not had these lower temperatures in quite some time. exposing about 60% of the U.S. population to some sort of winter weather advisory or warning. Well, I want us to notice in this particular section this one word, endured. There's a lot here I'm sure that you're not familiar with, but I try to pick words that you can actually use because at the end of the program we put 3 words together that we want you to try to use in a sentence. So this time we want to use this word, endured. Endured. Well, what is that all about? Well, I've spelled it phonetically this way, and this may not be the way that others do it, but I try to do it so that you can actually use it. So in, like the word in, and then you see the word your, so there's a D in front of there. Endured. Endured. And so you do put a little bit of emphasis on the D's. Endured, if I just say it normally. If you say it slowly, endured. Endured. What does that mean? To suffer something or to go through something patiently. Have you ever been to a restaurant? And it doesn't have to be a fine dining restaurant. It can be any kind of restaurant. And you place in your order and you keep waiting, you look at your watch and you say, what in the world is taking so long? And the server will come up, your order will be here just a few more minutes, And you say, I'm starving. Oh, I haven't had anything to eat. I'm starving. You're enduring, you're suffering through that, or you're patiently waiting for it to come to pass, for you to get that meal. Well, in the same way, Americans are enduring patiently these bone-chilling temperatures. Enduring. All right, let's go to the next paragraph. More than 200 million people were under an advisory or warning on Friday, and we still are, by the way, throughout the whole weekend, actually. That's according to the National Weather Service. The Weather Service's map depicts one of the greatest extents of winter weather warnings and advisory ever, forecasters said. So, again, by way of reading comprehension, what this paragraph is talking about is that there are more than 200 million of us here in the USA that are under these advisories for this cold weather. And then the Weather Service says, or its map depicts, it shows one of the greatest extents of winter weather warning. So in other words, there's more of the country that's in this winter weather warning than there is anything else. I want to look at the word depicts. What does it mean? The Weather Service's map depicts. Depicts. What does it mean? Well, that's our new word that we're going to look at. And it's spelled phonetically this way. Depicts. 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 The T there, depending on what part of the country you're in here in the U.S., or depending on how precise you want to be, you could say depicts, but it's a little unnatural. Most people would say depicts and let the T be silent. Well, to depict something means to show or represent by a picture or drawing. To show or represent by a picture or a drawing. And you see, that's what it's talking about. The map depicts, it shows by a map or a drawing about this great weather advisory that the forecasters have given to us. All right, let's move on to the next paragraph. Power outages have left about 1.4 million homes, and that's the way we would pronounce that. You could say one, well, most people would just say 1.4. When you see the dot there, you know in Europe they'll put a comma most of the time where we put a period. And so at least in American English, we would say 1.4 million homes and businesses in the dark. No power, according to the website Power Outage, which tracks utility reports. The Tennessee Valley Authority, the nation's largest public utility, ended its rolling blackouts Friday afternoon, but continued to urge homes and businesses to conserve power. I happen to be in Alabama. That's in the very southern portion of the U.S. Tennessee is the state next up to the north of us, and so the Tennessee Valley Authority controls a lot of the power in that particular area. And we've all had rolling blackouts. Fortunately, where I live, we have not had that yet. We might, but we haven't had it as yet. So, again, by way of context and reading comprehension, let's notice a couple of things here. The power outages have left those homes and businesses in the dark, so that means there's no power. I'm sure no matter where you are in this world that you have experienced that. And we have this website, Power Outage, that can show that. And again, these rolling blackouts. What is a rolling blackout? That happens in places. When I was in the Philippines, that happens quite often there. They'll send a message or they'll put up a posting and say this neighborhood or this part of town is going to be without power for the day. Perhaps they're fixing the lines. Perhaps they're conserving power. Who knows what the reason is? The power goes out quite a bit in the Philippines. But a rolling blackout. So it's going to be blacked out here. It's going to be blacked out there, blacked out another place. Here in the U.S., by the way, when you have a small area where there's no power, we call that a brownout. A brownout. If it's a widespread area, then it's called a blackout. So in other words, if you had, say, a neighborhood in the Philippines, a barangay, if you had some smaller area, that would be considered a brownout. If it affects a larger area, a blackout. That's how we would describe it here in the U.S. All right, let's move to the next paragraph. No new words in that one. And more than 4,600 flights within, into, or out of the U.S., so anywhere, that means flights within the U.S., coming into the U.S. or going out of the U.S., so basically all flights, no matter whether they're domestic. You remember we talked about that yesterday, the word domestic. Whether it's domestic or international, all flights were canceled today. There were 4,600. You can pronounce that, by the way, 4,600, or you can say 4,600. Were canceled Friday, according to the tracking site FlightAware, causing more mayhem as travelers try to make it home for the holidays. And again, our big holiday, just like a lot of places across the world, Christmas is coming up on Sunday, December the 25th. And this is, for us here in America, whether you celebrate Christmas or not, it is a national holiday. So it's one of really only two big national holidays that everybody can go home, go to see mom and dad or the rest of the family. And that's what makes this particular time of the year a big travel season. But this winter storm has very much impacted this year's travel season. All right, I want us to notice a word here, a new word perhaps for us, and that new word is mayhem. Mayhem. How do we spell that phonetically, and how do we say it? May, like maybe the month May, and then him as opposed to her, him. Now again, if you wanted to be very, very proper, again, I'm from the South, so I'm just saying how that we would do it. You could say mayhem, like the hymn in some other way, but most of us say mayhem, like a him as opposed to her. Well, what is it? What is mayhem? To show or represent something by a picture or drawing. That's actually not what the definition is it? Boy, did I mess that one up. Mayhem is something that is creates a a turmoil, and that's probably a bad way to. That's a deep word to use. Something that creates a problem, so causing more mayhem to as travelers try to make it home. So mayhem then is something that causes problems. We have a very famous insurance company, and they have as part of their commercials this man, actually he's a very famous actor, and he calls himself Mayhem. And mayhem causes problems and accidents and things like that. Well, I went to India in October and November, first part of November, and it was absolute mayhem and chaos getting there. When I got to the airport, that flight was canceled. But fortunately, British Airways, who canceled the flight without giving a lot of advance notice, was able to book me on to a Delta flight. And so the Delta flight got me there, and they had checked my luggage in to India. But because I was on a Delta flight rather than British Airways, I was late and I missed the next British Airways flight to India. So it was complete mayhem. In other words, chaos. It was complete problems from one step to the next, and that's really what mayhem is. All right, let's move on to the next paragraph. We've just got to stay positive, said Wendell Davis, who plays basketball with a team in France and was waiting at O'Hare in Chicago on Friday after a series of flight cancellations. So poor Wendell there was delayed there in Chicago. That's up in the north part of America, in the state of Illinois. We've got to stay positive. That's the best thing to do, isn't it? The next paragraph, the huge storm stretched from border to border in Canada. WestJet canceled all flights Friday at Toronto Pearson International Airport beginning at 9 a.m. That was this morning for us, as meteorologists, those are people that forecast the weather in the country, warned of a potential once-in-a-decade weather event. That's part of that generational event that I told you about earlier. All right, I want us to notice this particular word. It's a new word, maybe. Potential. Warned of a potential once-in-a-decade weather event. All right? Potential, spelled phonetically, P-10, like the number 10, and then chul. Some might put a CH there, shul, potential. But as we speak this in English, the T-I-A-L, you wouldn't pronounce teal. You know, one of the difficulties in English from other languages is this, that in other languages you pronounce every single letter. For me, who has tried to learn other languages, for example, Tagalog, or tried to learn Italian, or tried to learn Old Latin, you pronounce every single word, but unfortunately, or a letter, but in English, unfortunately, that's not the way that it goes. But anyways, we have phonetically put this as potential. Potential. Well, what does that mean? Something that has the ability to develop into the future. In other words, it's forthcoming, potential. In this case, it's the potential. This storm has the potential of being a once-in-a-decade weather event. There's the potential for it to be there. All right. Moving forward, forecasters said a bomb cyclone. Well, that sounds interesting, doesn't it? When atmospheric pressure drops very quickly in a strong storm, had developed near the Great Lakes. That's up in Michigan. That's an area that has several lakes around it. stirring up blizzard conditions, including heavy winds and snow. Now, let me just pause here just a moment. I know that, as my Indian friend says, that some of these stories contain a lot of American slang, a lot of things that you may not be familiar with. But I'm hoping the goal of this program is to concentrate on pronunciation and just learning a handful of new words. So you can go back and listen to the program again, but don't necessarily get all upset if you don't understand every single thing here. We're going to be with you for the long term, so we'll learn it together. So again, forecasters, that's weather forecasters, are calling this a bomb cyclone. In other words, it's just something that just drops all of the sudden. And that's because of atmospheric pressure, if you're familiar with that. And stirred up blizzard conditions, as you can see in this photograph here that was provided by AP, that people are having to deal with. We're not really equipped in the South to deal with this type situation. That's why it's particularly dangerous for us down in the South part of the USA as opposed to the North, because they're very used to dealing with it. All right, next paragraph. Multiple highways were closed and crashes, that's car crashes of course, claimed at least 5 lives, officials said. Very sad part of this type of a storm. At least one person died in a massive pileup involving at least 50 vehicles on the Ohio Turnpike, and that's another state that's up north. A Kansas City, Missouri driver, Missouri is in the out towards the west, the Midwest, was killed after skidding into a creek, and 3 others died Wednesday in separate road crashes on icy northern Kansas roads. So, by way of reading comprehension, what the paragraph is trying to tell us is that there were a number of highways. A highway is usually like a state road. It's more than a smaller road. It's always paved and usually has either 2 or 4 lanes. So these multiple highways were closed because of all of these crashes. The snow can be blinding and people cannot see and they're not paying attention and they just crash, one vehicle behind another, and that ends up closing some of the highways, and unfortunately some people have been killed because of that. Well, there's a word in here that you may not be familiar with, a new word. It's called skidding. What does it mean? These people, the driver was killed after skidding into a creek. Well, we're going to spell that phonetically this way: skidding, skidding. You wouldn't pronounce the double D's. It's only pronounced one time. You wouldn't say skid-ding. So it's skidding. And that simply means to slip or to turn sideways, usually in a vehicle. You wouldn't say that someone that was walking was skidding, because normally you think of a vehicle that has 2 back wheels, and if you've ever driven on ice or snow, you know that sometimes your vehicle will slide this way or that way. When you're walking, you're slipping, but in a car, usually it's referred to as skidding, to slip or to turn sideways, usually in a vehicle. All right, next paragraph. Brent Whitehead said it took him 7.5 or 7.5, you can say that either way, 7.5 or 7.5 hours instead of the usual 6 to drive from his home near Minneapolis to his parents' home outside Chicago on Thursday, as the wind froze his wipers and he struggled to control his car on the ice. Thank goodness I had Thank goodness I had my car equipped with snow tires, he said. All right. Let's see. We got a word here or not? I forgot. We do have a word. but by way of reading comprehension. So Mr. Whitehead said here it took him 7.5 hours, 7.5 hours. Usually it takes 6, so it took him an extra hour and a half to drive home. And it says that his windshield wipers had frozen. The wind froze his windshield wipers. It says wipers here, but that's what you use in the rain or in the snow to take off the rain or the snow. And so because of all of the freezing temperatures and the snow that had frozen, and he struggled to take control of his car. He struggled to take control of his car, and that's our new word that we want to look at. Struggled. Here's how we're going to spell that phonetically. Stra and then gold. Struggled. I told you in the last word we didn't pronounce the D. In this one you do pronounce it. Struggled. Struggled. If we say it fast, but to say it slow. Struggled. 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 And that means to make a strong effort to get free or away from something. In this case, he struggled to control his car. If you're playing American football, or if you're playing rugby in Australia, Australian rules football, and you have a player who's after you because you have the ball, and he grabs you to try to tackle you, you try to struggle to get away from him. Maybe, I hope you never are in a fight, but if you're ever in a fight and somebody tries to grab you, sneak up on you, you might struggle to get away from them. And so it's to make a strong effort to get free or to get away from something, or somebody for that matter. All right, as we get here to the end of the program, I want you to remember these words that we have gone through. Try to use them in a sentence if you can. Endured. Do you remember endured, that you try to struggle to go through something? Here's a sentence. That movie was terrible. I really endured it and forced myself to stay to the end. Have you ever been in a movie like that? Or maybe you've had a meal at a restaurant, or you got some food and you just endured as much as you could to try to eat it. Maybe your girlfriend or your husband or your wife or grandmother fixed something and it didn't taste good and you just have to endure it. Some people are not particularly fond. They don't like the holidays, and they'll say that they'll have to endure the holidays and being with their family. The next word that we are highlighting is mayhem. Mayhem, that may be a word you may not use much, but it's fun to use. Christmas is coming up and nobody wants to work. It's mayhem. Well, for us here in America, if you had to work today, I'm sure not very much work got done. And there are those who would try to struggle to get work done. And they would say it's just mayhem in here. Everybody's trying to party or to get out of here. They don't want to work. And it's just complete mayhem. And then finally the word struggled. Struggled. He was driving so fast, I struggled to keep up with him while driving behind. Have you ever followed someone? Perhaps you were going to on a vacation, you followed a friend, or maybe going to a store or something like that, and they decide they're going to take off and drive much faster. Well, in this case, in this sentence, as we have it here, he was driving so fast, I struggled to keep up with him while driving behind. Well, guess what? That is our program for today. It's been a pleasure to be with you today. This is our last broadcast day of the week. We'll be back again on Monday with another story as we continue to grow in English with today's news. Thank you so much for being with us today. Hope that we can see you again on Monday. And until then, hope you have a great weekend and a great holiday. See you next time here on Grow in English with today's news, hosted by yours truly, Paul.